I will introduce myself really quickly, but first of all, I want to thank everybody for taking some time out of their morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time it is where you are. I appreciate it, and I hope that you come away feeling like it was entirely worth it and that you got a lot of great information out of this webinar. So I am Leigh White. Some of you may know me. I've been able to meet quite a few people at conferences and things like that. I have a background in theoretical linguistics, which is something I stress because I have no background in computer science or anything like that. So I tell people if I can figure this stuff out, anybody can figure it out. And actually, linguistics has come in handy more than you would think in this field. I've been in TechCom since 1996. I've been working with various forms of XML since about 2001, and I've been working with DITA since 2007. I've been at IXIASOFT since 2013. This is a small plug for myself, I am the author of DITA for Print, a DITA Open Toolkit workbook, which came out about 3 years ago, and it's targeted for the DITA Open Toolkit 1.8.5, and I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that the revision, which is targeted for DITA Open Toolkit 2.0 plus, will be out in time for DITA North America. And I was also lucky enough to be asked to be a contributor to the language of technical communication and the language of content strategy, which are both really handy little books that feature articles written by some very recognizable names in our field. So if these are topics that interest you and you want to learn more about the terminology and the concepts, I can highly recommend both of them. So with that, let me get into what we'll cover today. So I'm first going to go through a kind of overview of keys in DITA 1.2 and their limitations, just in case there's anyone in the webinar who is not entirely familiar with keys. I'll give you a little background so you can follow the rest of the discussion. And then we'll go into looking at keys in DITA 1.3. So we'll talk about key scope and key space. I'll talk about parallel versus nested key spaces. I will briefly touch on some reuse implications with scoped keys and talk about cross-deliverable linking. And along the way, I'm gonna show you some demos, some different maps with different arrangements of keys. I'm gonna build some output really quick to show you what the effects of different approaches are. And then at the end, I'll leave some time for questions and comments. If you have questions along the way, particularly if you don't understand the last thing I just said, if you need some clarification, please go ahead and ask that question in the comment box. But if it's just sort of a general conceptual kind of question, maybe you want to save that to the end. But again, if there's anything you need me to clarify on the spot, I'll be happy to, because I want everybody to keep up and follow along. So with that, let's get started. So before keys, DITA offered only direct addressing as a way of referencing one thing from another thing. So you're probably all familiar with that. So you had things like topic ref, cross ref, image, where you referenced that other object, that other topic, or that other file via href. And we also had conref, which was a way of referencing another element in another topic. And there's examples of those four there. And what all of these had in common was that the destination of the reference was always fixed, regardless of context. So if you have topic ref, href equals my topic, that always points to my topic, no matter what. Well, sometimes we need a little more flexibility. So let's say you were using topic A in map 1 and map 2. And when you used topic A in map 1, you needed it to point to one image, but when you used the topic in map 2, you needed it to point to another image. Maybe they were for different modules or different products or something. So the only option we really had was to use conditions. And I've got an example of that here on the slide. So I've got 2 maps, and each one references a GetStarted.xml topic. And in that topic, I have 2 image elements that are, first one is referencing my image 1, and the second is referencing my image 2. And the first one I have conditionalized with the product equals widget attribute and value, and the second one I have conditionalized for product equals gadget. And what I then have to do is create what's called a DITA file and reference that when I build my output so that it will filter out either the product equals widget image or the product equals gadget, depending on what I'm creating. So I have to have 2 DITA files, and I have to remember to point to those during my build process when I'm creating my output. And that works, you know, it works. But if any of you have tried to get very complex with your conditions, you probably realize that it doesn't take very long before you can really get into some spaghetti territory with those conditions. And you can find yourself in a situation where you need 2 combinations of conditions, but it can't happen because of the limitations of DITA vowels. So conditions are great, but they can only take you so far in many cases. So with DITA 1.2, we saw the introduction of keys, and this allows for what's called indirect addressing. And I have the same 4 examples that I had on the previous slide, but this time, instead of using href or conref, I'm using something called keyref and conkeyref. And notice that, say, for the first one, for example, topic ref keyref equals get started, it's not pointing to a particular file. It's not pointing to getstarted.xml or getstarted.ping or anything like that. It's just get started. And the same thing with the others. The third one is a conkeyref, which is sort of a combination, as the name would suggest, of a conref and a keyref, where you really have sort of a double key. You know, you have the first half of the key that's going to point somewhere, and then the second half of the key is going to point somewhere within the first thing. Don't worry about that. So the keyref isn't pointing to an object. It's pointing to a variable, if you will. So all 4 of those, get started, cust service, engine diag, module name, these are variables. And their value can change in context. Now, as with any variable, somewhere you do have to define the variable. And you define the variable or the keys in the parent map. And by parent map, I mean somewhere in the scope of the map that you are sending for output. So let's take a quick look at that. I've put together a simple little demo of how that works. And whoops, wrong. Okay, so, and what you're gonna see, if you don't know what you're looking at, I'm just running a quick build through a local installation of the DITA Open Toolkit that I have. So don't worry about what you see here. It doesn't really matter. And the output that I got from this is a a simple web page. Now, there's a story behind what you're seeing here, and that is, really quickly, that last week I was copied on an email that a friend and colleague sent around to her team, urging them to attend this webinar, and also saying she's aware that I've been studying Welsh for several months now, and she bet her team that I would find some way to incorporate Welsh and keys. And I thought about it. I took it as a challenge. I thought about it, and I couldn't figure out any connection between Welsh and keys. So I did the next best thing, which is I'm using some Welsh in some of my examples. So that's the best I could do. I don't know if that meets the challenge or not, but that's why you see these funny words that look like a word scramble. So before we look at the output, let me just show you the map really quick. So the map looks like this. So I've got 3 topic refs. The first 2 use key refs, and they point to a key, get started, and tour service. The third topic ref points to an actual file. Now, down here, below the topic refs, I have actually defined those keys. So my get started key is defined as a topic title, or whose file name is gettingstarted.xml. And tour service is pointing to a topic file name, tourist services XML. Now, these 2 keys are not actually used in the map, but they are used in the city.xml topic. And that's important because the thing to remember is, even though those keys are used in this topic, I can't define keys in a topic. I can only define them in a map. And that's the beauty of keys, is that if I used this topic in some other map, I could define this key entirely differently. These first 3 keys point to or are defined as other topics. This is a different kind of key here. It is actually a keyword key, which means that instead of swapping out an entire topic or an entire image, it's just going to swap out a word or a phrase. So looking quickly at this city.xml topic, I can see where that city name key is being called here, and the city photo key is being called here. And this is a con key ref. So knowing that these are the values of my keys, I can come back out and look at my output. And this is information for Carnarvon and more Carnarvon. And notice how it has inserted the word, the city name, Carnarvon, here. It has inserted the city name here in the caption. And it has inserted a picture of Carnarvon. So that's what I expected to see. Now, if I come back out to my map, I can see that down here I have some stuff commented out. These are a different set of key definitions for a different town called Llanberis. And instead of defining these keys directly in the map, I've defined the keys in another map, and I'm referencing that map from this map. So this is just to point out to you that you can define keys directly in a map, or you can have a map of nothing but keys, and then you can reference your key map from your root map. So I'm not going to go any farther with that. It's just pointing out that there are different levels at which you can define your keys. And if I comment out all of these keys, and uncomment the reference to this map of keys for Llanberis, and redo this output, I'm going to get a completely different set of topics, a completely different photograph, And I don't have to use conditions. All I have to do, and it's the same map, the exact same map. All I'm doing is swapping out one set of keys or one set of variable definitions for another. So notice that these two topic titles are completely different. Instead of getting started in Kernofon, now it's what to do first in Llanberis. And if I look at my city of, I have a completely different photograph, different title, different caption. So that is a very quick overview of how keys originally worked, how they were designed to work in DITA 1.2.
So, Leigh, as you get, before you get started, someone did make a comment. You were using oxygen there, and they made the comment that in XMetal you have to define a map for just the keys. You can't do it in the main map. So, but really? Similar idea, similar concept.
Actually, that was not oxygen. That was actually just Notepad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, or Notepad++. And it's unfortunate if XMetal has that limitation, because that is actually not a requirement of DITA. That is a requirement of XMetal specifically. So, but yeah, XMetal users, take note.
Yeah, and if someone from XMetal's on the webinar, go ahead and make a comment on that if you feel the person commented incorrectly there.
So. Moving on, so that's how keys originally worked in DITA 1.2. Now, there was one really big limitation to this. As wonderful as keys were, and as excited as we all were about them, once we started implementing them, we ran up kind of against a little bit of a wall. And that was that a key can only have one definition within a root map. So if the same key is defined multiple times, the first definition wins. And exactly what first is can be a little bit less than straightforward. It's mostly straightforward, but there are some exceptional cases, which I don't have time to go into here. If you are interested in what the processor considers to be the first definition, there's a really good article here at this link that you can read and learn more about what is first. But essentially, most of the time, I would say 95% of the time, the definition that you instinctively feel is the first one is in fact the first one. And what happens is the processor, and by that I generally mean the DITA Open Toolkit, when it sees that first definition for key X, it locks it in. And if key X is redefined anywhere else farther down in the map, it just ignores those subsequent definitions. So again, a quick look at that.
Doing that, when she's doing that, a user of XMetal did chime in and say they have been able to define the keys in the main map. So
okay.
there is a way to do that.
Okay. So let's look at Demo 2. Demo 2 is a basic map that references two other maps. And the other two maps, Demo 2A and 2B, are identical. They reference a topic named introduction.xml, and they define a key named city name. The first map defines city name as Kernofon, and the second map defines city name as Llanberis. Now, my intention when I create output is that I want to get two copies of the introduction topic. And I want the first one to have the city name Kernofon in it. And I want the second one to have the city name Llanberis in it. And notice that I've used the copy to attribute here, because obviously if I want the same key defined two different ways, I've got to have two different copies, and this copy to is what instructs the processor to make a copy of this. So if I generate this output, I do get 2 copies. I get You're Gonna Love Carnophon, and then I get You're Gonna Love Carnophon, which is true. You would love it if you went. It's a very nice place, but you will also love Llanberis, and I wanted to be able to say that. And I cannot, because this is the limitation in a very small example of keys in DITA 1.2. The first definition of the key, which was the definition that was found in map 2A, was Carnophon, and that was locked in. The DITA Open Toolkit said, okay, that's what this key is, that's what this key will always be. So that was the problem, because there are many cases where you are reusing, you have complex maps with submaps, and you're reusing topics in those various submaps, and maybe each of those submaps is for a different module of your product or something, and you want to reuse sort of a generic topic in multiple places, but you want it to have the appropriate module name in each location where you use it. So people came up with workarounds. They did this, they did that. They made it work. They made the best of it. And this was recognized from the start as a limitation. And finally, with the introduction of DITA 1.3 last year, we were able to overcome that limitation. So with DITA 1.3, we saw the introduction of the key scope attribute, and it overcomes that first definition wins limitation. So now, if you use key scope, you can define the same key multiple times in a root map as long as each definition is contained in a separate key space. So, what is a key space? Well, a key space is potentially any node of a map, including, from, I guess, most granular to least, a topic ref, topic group, topic head, map ref, or the map itself. So I have an example of all 5 of those in this little map here on the slide. So notice that on the map itself, I have a key scope attribute which defines the map as a key space named keys1. And inside of the keys1 key space, I've defined a key named widget. Now, I'll point out really quickly, if anyone's a purist out there, that for the sake of saving space on the slide, I have greatly abbreviated the syntax for defining a keyword key. This is not the correct syntax, but you get the idea. Then I have, within the map, I have a topic head that has a key scope attribute on it with a value of keys2, which defines the entire topic head as a key space named keys2. And inside of that key space, I have a key named location, which is defined as Milwaukee. After the topic head, I have a topic group, which has a key scope attribute which defines the entire topic group as a keys3 key space, and inside of that I have a key named section whose definition is 3C. Then I have a topic ref, which uses the key scope attribute to define that topic ref as a key space named keys4, and inside of that I have a key named bin number defined with a definition of 8463. And finally, my root map references another map called mapd DITA map, and that map ref has a key scope on it which defines the entire map as a keys5 key space, and inside of that map ref I have a key definition part number which is A3483H5. Now it's somewhat unlikely that you would use all 5 kinds of key spaces together, but you could. This is just an example to show you all of the possibilities. So key spaces can be very, very specific, or they can be very, very general. Now, I'm going to take a moment and clarify a little terminology, excuse me. There's key scope and there's key space. You'll hear both terms. Key scope is the name of the attribute that denotes or defines a key space. So I really have no idea why they did not name the attribute key space in the first place. These things happen. But at any rate, when you hear the two terms, just understand they're not exactly the same thing. You'll hear a lot of people say, oh, this key is defined in that key scope. And that's not horrible. I mean, that's the idea. But there are two separate terms that do apply to two slightly different things. So, going back to what is a key space, you can think of a key space as a fence around a certain part of the map. So, to go back to the example we looked at a minute ago, there are 5 key spaces in this map. There are 5 fences in this map, and I've drawn them here. So there's, this first key space that is the topic head. There's the second key space, which is the topic group. The third, topic ref. The fourth, the map ref. And then a big fence that encloses all of those smaller fences, which is the fence around the entire map. And any keys defined inside a fence only apply within that fence. Except, of course, when they don't, because that's the way DITA is. Everything is what it is until it's not that. And I'll talk a little bit later about how you can use keys from one fence inside of another fence. But by default, unless you make special arrangements, keys defined inside a fence only apply within the fence.
So Leigh, there was a question they wanted to know, wouldn't you typically be defining the same key in each space, but with a different values?
Maybe yes, and maybe no. I mean, this example, as I said, is kind of silly and kind of trivial and kind of improbable. Just because I wanted to show you different examples. You would, if you were defining different keys in different key spaces, it's very possible that you wouldn't even need the key spaces because the key definitions are never going to be in conflict with each other. But it is possible that you would want to define key spaces for other reasons too. But yes, definitely if you are redefining the same key multiple times, you're going to have to use the key spaces to get the effects that you want. But that's a good point, and I'm going to kind of circle back to what I think part of that question was a little bit later. So hang tight. So here's a simple example of that, Demo 3, and Demo 3 is very similar to Demo 2. I again have the root map, which references 2 submaps. But now notice that each of these map refs has a key scope on it. So the first map ref is going to be a key space widget, and the second map is going to be a key space gadget. And if I take a look at those 2 maps, again, they're going to be very, very similar to the submaps we saw in the previous demo. So again, they reference the introduction topic, and they define the city name key, one as Carnarvon, one as Llanberis. And this time, when I generate my output, Now, yes, you are going to love Kernavon, and you are also going to love Slanberis. So by using the two key spaces, I was able to define city name as Kernavon in my first submap, in my first copy of introduction. And in my second submap, in my second copy of introduction, I was able to redefine the city name key as Slanberis. And notice that, well, first of all, I did not use the copy to attribute in any of these maps, submaps. I didn't have to. The DITA Open Toolkit is smart enough to know that if I'm defining a key more than once, then obviously I need multiple copies of the topic. And it went ahead and it created those two for me automatically. Although if you need specific names for the topics, the copies that are created, you can still use copy 2 to specify an exact name. Otherwise, the DITA Open Toolkit is just going to do something like this. It's just going to append dash and a number to each subsequent copy of the topic. So that's the beauty of keys in DITA 1.3. They're a lot more flexible. Now, with that flexibility, as with anything, comes some complexity. And we'll talk about that in a bit. But first, I want to make a distinction between parallel key spaces and nested key spaces. So parallel key spaces would be multiple key spaces in a map that don't contain or overlap with each other. So here's a map with two parallel key spaces in it. So the first key space is the topic group. It's the key space widget. Here's that fence. Then there is a sibling to topic group, which is topic head. It is the gadget key space. There's the fence around that. Notice there's no overlap. These two are both sibling, child key spaces in the root map. So when you have parallel key spaces, this is very straightforward. There are no conflicts in the key resolution. The keys resolve exactly how you would expect them to. It's all good. Now, you can have nested key spaces as well. And these are, as you would suspect, multiple key spaces in a map that contain each other or that overlap with each other. So here's an example. We have the root map itself is a key space named keys 1. Within it, there's a submap. It is a key space named keys 2. And then within the submap, there's a key space named keys 3. So keys 1 contains keys 2, which contains keys 3. And the module name key is defined in all three of these key spaces with 3 different definitions. This is not straightforward for key resolution. The results can be non-intuitive. So what would you think if you were looking at this map, and if you know the answer, don't cheat, or don't, it's kind of like playing team trivia, don't blurt it out, as they say. What do you think the module name key would resolve to? Well, let's find out. I'm going to say, just looking at that I think it's going to resolve to doodad for the simple reason that doodad is the closest key definition to the actual topic that contains the key. So that's my guess. So let's see if that in fact happens. also, well, actually, that's not the example I used. The map that I use is exactly the same, but I just spoiled the spoiled the outcome there. But let me show you the map that I used really quick, which is exactly parallel to the one that we were just looking at. So here is my map, demo 4. It references the demo 4A DITA map. In my map, which is going to be my highest level key space, I have defined a city name key, Aberystwyth. And inside of map 4A, I have defined that this map is also going to be a key space, defining the key city name as Caernarfon. And inside of that map, I have a topic group, which is defining the city name key as Llanberis. And again, here's my topic. I'm going to expect my topic, I'm going to expect the key to resolve to Llanberis inside of this topic, because this is the closest key definition to the topic itself. And that is not what happens. It actually defined, the key was resolved to Aberystwyth, which is the farthest key definition away from the topic. It is pretty much this one up here, okay? Not this one, but this one. So what's happened here is that when the key spaces overlap, the Open Toolkit just falls back to the DITA 1.2 processing rules, which are the first definition wins. In other words, it doesn't define it first as widget and then supplant that with gadget and then supplant that with doodad. It defines it as widget and it stays there. Now, why is that? Because that does seem counterintuitive. Well, the reason is that DITA 1.3 has a mandate to be fully backwards compatible with earlier versions of DITA, meaning that nothing in DITA 1.3 should break any of your content that you created using earlier versions of DITA. Now, as I mentioned earlier, a lot of people have created very innovative workarounds in DITA 1.2 to get around the key limitation of one definition per map. DITA 1.3 does not want to break any of those innovations. In other words, if you don't want to take the time to rework, restructure all of your maps to use key spaces, you shouldn't have to. You should be able to go forward processing those maps with a newer version of the toolkit and have your output be exactly what it has always been. It should be your choice whether or not you want to take advantage of keyscope. So if the DITA Open Toolkit implemented rules, or if DITA 1.3 implemented rules that the DITA Open Toolkit put into play, to do something like take the closest key definition to a topic or something like that, that could break or change the key resolution in maps that were designed in DITA 1.2. So while that isn't necessarily intuitive, it is necessary to maintain backwards compatibility. Also, aside from the backwards compatibility considerations, the architectural complexity of managing nested key spaces in heavy reuse situations can be quite considerable. You don't always know, and this kind of goes back a little bit to the question that was asked earlier, depending on how your documentation group is organized, depending on how closely everyone works together, depending on how much crossover there is between writers and information architects and all of that, you may have writers who work in a sort of a bubble in that they write topics and someone else incorporates those topics into maps and submaps and builds, you know, multiple level maps and book maps referencing multiple maps as chapters or appendices or whatever. So the individual author is not necessarily going to be aware of the ultimate structure of the maps that they're going to end up perhaps generating output from. It's all going to fall on the shoulders of one or a few information architects. So, or perhaps you know, you have writers who are adding topics to maps, but they're not necessarily aware of the structure of those maps. So you don't necessarily know when you may end up with nested key spaces. You can end up with nested key spaces inadvertently. So the point to remember, though, just to keep it simple and to avoid having a whole tangle of complicated rules for resolving nested key spaces, is if the same key is defined at both a parent and child level, the parent definition always wins. This is always true. There are no exceptions. When your key spaces are parallel, you don't have a parent-child situation, so the rule does not apply there. But when you have nested key spaces, you do have parent-child relationships, and the rule applies then. So are there any questions about nested key spaces?
None have popped up, but maybe folks are anxiously typing at this point. But
Maybe so.
So far, none are there.
Okay, so if any pop up, let me know, because this is a very important point to understand. Now,
we've got one.
Okay.
It says, what is the, I think it's reuse case for nested keys?
Well, I'm perhaps going to address that right here. So the most likely scenario in which you would end up with, well, there's a couple of potential scenarios. So let's say that you have created a map, and that map has, let's say, 2 topic heads in it. And the first topic head you have defined as key space 1, and the second topic head you've defined as key space 2. And in the context of just your map, those are parallel key spaces and everything is great. But let's say that some other writer uses your map as a submap in their map. And on their map, they have defined another key space, let's say key space 3. So once they reference your map from their map, now they have key space 3, and nested within key space 3, there is now key space 1 and key space 2. And again, sort of inadvertently, without realizing it, they have defined the same key in their map as you have defined in yours. So now you have 3 definitions of that key, 1 definition in the parent key space 1, and another definition in the child key space 2, and another definition in the child key space 3. So now you have they have created a nested key situation, nested key scope, key space situation without being aware of it, because maybe they aren't even aware of the structure of your map. They know you've got this map, and they need this map as a chapter in their book map. So they've just pointed to it. They've never opened your map. They don't know what it looks like. They don't know what keys you have. And so now they're not necessarily going to get the output that they expect. Or they may. It depends on what they expect. But their key in their map is going to override your key definitions in your map. If that's the desired outcome, that's good. But if they're expecting your keys to be in effect, your key definitions to be in effect, they're going to get a big surprise. So in general, when maps are being reused as submaps of other maps and things like, there's always the potential to inadvertently create nested key space situations.
All right, Leigh, there is a question. I think you may have answered it, but the question is, if a parent map has no keyscope attribute defined, but the submaps have different key spaces, would keys defined in the parent map be used, or the keys in the parallel key space in the submaps?
Well, a map that's a very good question. Even if you do not explicitly define keyscope on a map, there is an implicit keyscope there. So in the case where you have, even if you have not explicitly defined keyscope on a parent map, but you have key spaces within submaps, and you have the same key defined in the parent map and somewhere in the submaps, it's going to be the parent map key definition that is going to hold, I do believe. And that brings me to this point here, which is where do you put keyscope on a map? So as I said, even if you don't define keyscope for a map, there's one there implicitly, but of course you can make it explicit. You can define, when you create a map, you can define map keyscope equals keys 1. My personal best practice is not to do this. My personal best practice is to put the keyscope on the map ref. So I have a map here, and it references map 1 and map 2. I do not have keyscope on the map element of map 1 DITA map or on the map element of map 2. Instead, when I reference those two maps from a parent map, I put keyscope on the map ref. And that gives me more control at the authoring point, at the point where I'm using these submaps to determine what kind of keyscope I want to have. And even though the maps have an implicit keyscope on them, it can be a good practice to name a keyscope, because with a named key space, you have a lot more flexibility in referencing specific instances of a key, which I'll get to in a minute. But the use case here is that the information architect who just created this map doesn't have access to map 1. They just know it has to be a submap of the root map for this publication. But if map 1 defined its own key space on its map element, such as keys 2, then references to key names defined or qualified with the keys 2 key space would resolve to map 1, not map 2. I'm not sure what I meant there. Right. So, So if I had map 1, and it had a keyscope keys 2, and I reference that map here, what I'm going to end up with is 2 key spaces, both named keys 2, because I don't know that this map has a keyscope named keys 2. I can't see that map. So I add that to this map. It already has keys 2 defined. Then I add this map to my map, and I define it with a keyscope or key space of keys 2. Now I've got 2 maps that have the same key space name. And because this would be the first map that had a keys 2 key space name, all my keys that were pointing to the keys 2 key space would resolve to keys defined here, not to keys defined here. And that's probably not what I'm expecting, because I named my map, or I gave my map a keys to keyscope with the intention that I want to use key definitions from this map, not this map, not the first one. So I think, for that reason, it's best to define all map-level key spaces in the root map itself to do this, and not to have keyscope defined on map elements themselves. Now, that still doesn't overcome the issue that there may be key spaces defined within map 1 that I still don't know about, but at least I can eliminate one level of potential conflict. Now, as with anything, you know, your mileage may vary on this, and this is the thing to remember about keys, is that because keys can be used almost anywhere in a map, on any node in a map, if you are going to be working with maps that you are not aware of the content of necessarily, it is entirely possible that there will be conflicts between the key definitions. And this is why it is really a best practice to, amongst your group and amongst your authors, decide where you will or will not create key spaces, so that at least there will be predictable places to look. You know, if you've got one writer who's creating key spaces on individual topic refs, and none of the other writers do that, then if you're using one of that writer's maps, you have to remember that they may have these, you know, topic ref key spaces floating around in their map. So consistency with everything is going to be a big key, no pun intended, to success here. And this is complex stuff. I mean, this adds a level of complexity to keys that you're going to have good processes in place to manage, particularly if you're reusing content. If you don't reuse content, if you create your maps and no one else uses them, and you're the only person who does anything with them, and it's your own show, then you can do whatever you want. But if you have people reusing maps as submaps of main publication maps, then you're going to have to be very careful about how and where you define these key spaces to make sure that you're not creating these key definition conflicts. Now, I mentioned using keys in other key spaces. So I said earlier that if you have your fences in your map, and a key that's defined inside of one fence cannot be seen inside of any of the other fences. It's invisible. The fence is really a fence. So what if you want to use a key in key space 2 that you've defined in key space 1? Can you do that? Yes, you can. Here's what doesn't work. What doesn't work is to allow a key definition at a higher level to be inherited at a lower level if no lower level definition is present. So you might be thinking, okay, you know, I know that some topics in these different submaps use the product name key, and I'm not sure that the product name key is defined in those other maps. Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, and where it, wherever it happens to not be defined, I want to create a fallback. So in my parent map, I'm going to create a product name key widget, and then if it so happens that there are topics used anywhere in any of these submaps that don't have a product name key definition, they'll just inherit widget. Well, that makes sense, but it won't work for the reason that I talked about earlier, which is that a key definition at a higher nesting level or a parent level always takes precedence over one at a lower level. So if I define the product name as widget in my root map, then widget is what it's going to be throughout the entire map. even if it is redefined at a lower level, a child level, a submap level, as gadget or doodad, it's going to be widget, just as we saw in the example with the city names. It wasn't redefined as Carnarvon, it wasn't redefined as Llanberis, it was Aberystwyth, because that was the first definition of the city name, and that was the one that held. So the fallback or default approach to keys is not going to work. So if you consider this map here, so I've got the trim key defined in my root map, and I've also got a trim key defined in my gadget DITA map. My expectation is that if, let's say, a topic in this map happens to use the trim key, then it'll use TR as a fallback definition for that key. But when I get down here, the topics in here get started, in this map, for example, any topics in this map that use the trim key will use the value XR, because I do have a trim key defined there. But that's not what's going to happen. This key definition here at the root map is going to take precedence over any subsequent definitions at nested levels in this map. And so I will see trim defined as TR everywhere. So the fallback method does not work. Because remember, and I can't say this often enough, if the same key is defined at both a parent and child level, the parent definition always wins. No exceptions. But of course, you may want to use keys in other key spaces. And there is a way, and this is called scope qualification. So this allows you to share keys between parallel key spaces or nested key spaces, I should have said that, by explicitly referring to the key scope name. So here's the same map that we, or similar map that we looked at a little earlier. So in the Get Started topic, there's a paragraph that references the module name and the version key. Okay, so the module name key is defined in widget DITA map, and it's also defined in gadget DITA map. But the version key is only defined in the widget DITA map. It's only inside of the widget key space. But the Get Started topic is inside of the gadget key space. So inside of my Get Started topic, I've got this paragraph that's referencing the two keys. So here, we're using the module name key, and that's cool because there is a module name key inside of the same key space as my topic. But there is no version key inside of the same key space as my topic. It's in another key space. So what's going to happen in this example, if I leave that just as is, and this is, I'll show you these maps very quickly here. Oops, sorry, opened the wrong stuff. So inside of my map, I'm citing two submaps, widget and gadget. And I've got exactly the same module name key, version key, 4.2. And in my second map, I have just a module name key and a trim key, but no version key. And here is my topic ref to a topic named Overview. If I generate this output as is, oops, I'm just having a problem here today getting my, okay. So now I've got my module name key properly resolved as I expected to gadget, but I have nothing for the version key. It's just unresolved because this topic, it looked inside of its gadget key space for a key named version, and it didn't find one. Sorry, 5B. It didn't find one. It did find module name. It resolved that to gadget, but it didn't find version. So, what to do? I don't want to redefine version in my second submap because I don't feel that I need to. There's already a definition for that key that I want to use, and so I can do that. If I come into my module name or my overview topic here, and I say, okay, I want to use the version key that's inside of the widget key space. I can just add that key space name to my key. Key space name, period, key name. And now, if I generate output, after specifically citing the key space name where the key that I want to use is found, I will get, she said, now I have the version. The gadget 4.2 does everything but walk your dog. So this is the mechanism whereby you can use a key from one key space within another key space. It's sort of like, it's basically a path. Think of it as a path. You're including the full path in a link, for example, to ensure that your link in this topic can traverse some file system to find the destination for that link. And this is the same thing you're doing. You're ensuring that this key reference can traverse your map structure and your key space structure to find the specific instance of a key that you want to use. So any compliant processor can find that key space if you have properly defined the path to it. So, and DITA Open Toolkit 2.0 Plus is a compliant processor. And let me take a minute here to make a point that you're going to need DITA OT 2.0 or higher to process any of the DITA 1.3 features. 1.8.5 will not work. If you're using DITA 1.3 stuff, your builds will not be successful because 1.8.5 does not have any processing. It does not recognize any. It won't even recognize the key scope attribute. It won't recognize DITA val ref if you're using that. It won't recognize any of the XML mention elements. It won't recognize any of the DITA 1.3 stuff. So if you want to use key scope, you're going to have to upgrade your OT, and that may also require that you upgrade or update some of your custom plugins. So before you make the move, if you're considering it, make sure that you've allocated sufficient time and resources to test those plugins and to upgrade them if necessary. So it's a multi-step process moving from DITA 1.2 to DITA 1.3. Now you can have multi-level key spaces in a key key reference. So again, here's another sort of silly and improbable and unlikely example. But I've got a topic called Get Started DITA, which is inside of a submap, which is inside of a parent map, and the parent map, or the first submap of the parent map, has a keyscope named, or keyspace widget, and within the widget keyspace there's a gadget keyspace, and within the gadget keyspace there's a doodad keyspace, and within the doodad keyspace I have a trim key defined. And in my Get Started DITA topic, I want to reference this trim key. So I'm going to have to put the full path to this key in my Get Started DITA topic. And this is just like, again, just like paths. If you are referencing something in folder X from folder Y, and they are, you know, at different levels in your folder structure, you're going to have, your path is going to have to go all the way up to the first common level that those two folders share, and then navigate back down to it. So basically, I'm going to have to go to the highest level keyscope, which is widget. Then within widget, look for the gadget keyspace, and then within gadget, look for the doodad keyspace, and then finally look for the trim key. If I just put doodad trim, that won't be sufficient because it's going to be looking for a doodad keyspace at a sibling level to this topic, and it won't find it. So remember, this is a keyspace, even though there's not one explicitly defined on it, and this is a keyspace, and they are siblings. So this is where, at the sibling level, basically, you have to start. Or actually, technically, you're starting at the parent of those siblings, which is here, but you don't have to cite that in your path anywhere. You just start at the root level of the map and then start navigating down through your nested key spaces to finally get to the key space where the key you want to use is defined.
So Leah, there's a question. Does that mean if the same key is defined in two parallel key spaces, A and B, a key ref in a topic in key space B can actually reference the definition in key space A and ignore the one in key space B?
Yes. So I had something like that here. Where did I have this example? So I had... Well, could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Sure. It says, does that mean if the same key is defined in two parallel key spaces, A and B, a key ref in a topic in key space B can actually reference the definition in key space A and ignore the one in key space B?
Yes. So in this example here, if I wanted my Get Started topic to reference the module name key here and resolve to widget rather than gadget, then I would, instead of my key being simply something like, you know, key ref equals module name, I would have to say key ref equals widget dot module name, so that it would ignore this definition, which is the one it's going to pick up by default if you don't name a key space, because that's where the topic is. The topic is inside of this key space, and that's where it's going to look first. But say ignore the one that you find in your own key space and go up here to the widget key space and use the module name key in there. Is that clear?
I think so.
Okay. So basically, any time you want to use a key that is not in the same key space where the topic itself is referenced, you need to include the key space name. Because by default, the topic is going to look for that key definition inside of its own fence. You really, if you think of the key space as a fence, and your topic is inside of that fence, it's only going to look for keys that are also defined inside of that fence. If you want to use keys inside of another fence, you got to tell it which fence you want it to go look in. And that sort of brings me to the last point that I wanted to show you. And I'm not even going to try to demo this live because I was using Oxygen, and I love me some Oxygen, but in this one respect, it was driving me a little bit crazy, and I had to restart it a couple of times to actually see what I wanted to see, and that'll take time, and I don't want to do that here. But when you are, and I've had XML editor ambiguity, and that's really not a good title for this slide because it's not that the editor is being ambiguous. The editor is showing you exactly what is present in your context, but I guess it is the XML editor user ambiguity because you may not be seeing what you expect to see. So let me come out to a map here, which is this Demo 6 map. Now in this map, I have my parent map, and in that parent map, I have a topic ref, ourpromise1.xml. The whole map is the widget key space. Inside of that widget key space, there is a module key. And within the widget key space is our promise 1 topic. Then there's a topic group. That topic group is the gadget key space. It also defines the module key as gadget, and it references our promise 2. And then within that topic group is a topic ref to our promise 3, and the topic ref itself is another key space named doodad, and it also defines the module key with the definition of doodad. Okay? So you've got the same, you've got nested key spaces, and you've got the same key module defined 3 different ways in each key space. And you've got different topics in those different key spaces. Now, when you open one of these topics, I will do just one. When you open one of these topics from the map in Oxygen, for example, the Our Promise 1 topic, and let's say that I want to insert that module key right here where this space is. So I click my little icon here and choose key, and click this to see a list of the keys that are available. Notice that it is actually showing me the keys along with the key spaces that they're in. So I can use any one of those 3 module keys in this topic. I can use the module key that's found inside of the widget key space. I can use the module key that's found inside of the gadget key space, which is nested inside the widget key space. Or I can use the module key that is inside of the doodad key space, which is nested in the gadget key space, which is nested in the widget key space. And it helpfully gives me what that key will be resolved to so that I can better judge which one I want to use. Now, you may think, oh great, this is very helpful, this is fine. But when you open Our Promise 2, or if you open Our Promise 3 to insert the module key, you're going to see very different things. So I managed to get screenshots here to show you that what you see may differ. So this is what you see, what we just saw when you open Our Promise 1 and go to insert the module key. If I open Our Promise 2 and go to insert the module key, my list is completely different. And that's because I've changed the focus of where I am. And therefore, my pathing from this location to those different keys is going to be different. So I still see widget module, I still see widget gadget module, I still see widget gadget doodad module, but now I see just a plain module key with no pathing on it, no scope qualification. And then I also see the doodad module key, which is the same thing as this key. These two keys, the widget gadget doodad module and the doodad module key, are actually the same key, but there's two different paths to this cheese, as it were. And then I can just insert the module key, because now I'm inside of the gadget key space, and now there's a module key defined inside of the gadget key space, so I can insert it without any qualification at all. Then if I come over to our promise 3 and open it and go to insert the module key, I get a different set of keys now. I get the same 3 that I have all along, but now I also can insert just a plain module key with no qualification. But now if I do that, it's going to resolve to doodad, because now I'm inside of the doodad key space. And so the module key that it sees without qualification is going to be the one inside of its own key space. So the point that I want to make here, and the point that, that those of you who are going to be working with this will have to think about and plan and make sure your authors understand, is that there are different implications for what they choose in this dialog. For example, if they just choose to insert module, then they need to understand that now they've got an unqualified key, which is more flexible, because now they can just drop that topic with that unqualified module key anywhere. And if there is a module key defined inside of the key space that includes that topic, then it's automatically going to pick up that key resolution. And that may be what you want. That may be the level of flexibility that you want. That means, of course, that there has to be a module key defined inside of that key space. Otherwise, it will not resolve to anything. If they choose to insert a qualified key, then say they choose to insert this one, the fully qualified key with the full path. Well, now anywhere they want to use that topic, they're going to have to ensure that that map has a widget key space that contains a gadget key space that contains a doodad key space, which is not always possible to do. So by qualifying key scopes, you can potentially limit the reusability of a topic, because now you have to ensure that that key space structure is present in every map where you're going to use that topic. An alternative to that is you could say you have added this key, this fully qualified key, to your topic, and now you want to use this topic in a map that does not have a widget key space that contains a gadget key space that contains a doodad key space. You can get around that by defining a key whose name is widget.gadget.doodad.module. That can be the key name, and that will work just the same as if you had this nested key space structure. But again, that's something that you're going to have to know to do, and that's something that your author is going to have to know to do, or your information architect is going to have to know to do. So you trade, I guess, for lack of a better term, you trade precision for flexibility. If you just have this module key in there, it's pretty easy to just define a module key somewhere. But then you have to make sure that you do define it somewhere. And if you're using it in another map that already has a module definition somewhere else, there's always the risk that it may pick up an unexpected definition for the module key. So reuse with scoped keys becomes sort of exponentially more challenging. So you need to know the key. Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, we are coming up on the 90-minute mark.
Okay.
I don't know how many more slides you have. There are 1 or 2 questions that have come in. How many more slides do you have? And I don't know, can we stay on longer? I mean, you still have a pretty good group of people online.
I'm going to stay on longer. I don't have a clock in front of me, and the time kind of got away from me. So yeah, I can stay as long as anybody else wants to.
All right. Okay. So before you go, there was a question. This is kind of a humorous one. They want to know, is widget, gadget, doodad a Welsh term? I thought, but this is a more serious one, and maybe I don't know if you'll get to it, and it's kind of a wrap-up one too, but it's, they wanted to know, they're not going to be using something called Key 1. Can you recommend best practices for naming keys?
You mean Keyspaces?
Let's see if they didn't really say.
Yeah. Well, I can do both. Basically, you can name a key space anything you want. There is absolutely no limitation. Obviously, it's going to end up with the key space can't have spaces in the name, just like any sort of attribute value cannot have a space in its name. And probably there's actually some discussion going around about to what extent the specification wants to allow special characters in key space names. I think right now it's wide open, but I would recommend not using special characters. I would recommend sticking to alphanumeric and perhaps underscore and dash. Key names and key space names, obviously, for obvious reasons, should not contain a period, because period is the separator between key space names in a qualified key name. So if you have a period in your key space name or a period in your key name, that's going to create problems. But other than those things, it's wide open.
Okay.
Probably not a bad idea to establish some conventions for it internally so that it's at least somewhat predictable to everybody.
Okay, and the person did reply back and said it was relevant to key spaces, so that you answered it.
Okay.
And then just in case people have to drop off, I did want to get this other question in. It has to do with your comment a couple of slides ago that you need to make sure your OT is 2.0.
Yeah.
And that you need to upgrade it for the key structures to work. And they want to know do you know if EasyDITA recognizes them?
I have no idea.
Okay. And again, if anybody else out there does, then go ahead and let us know.
All right, so those of you who are able to hang around, I appreciate it. Sorry that I'm running over. I do respect your time. There's an awful lot to say about keys. But my last point is cross-deliverable linking, which is a way to create links from one publication to another. So let's say that BigCorp has these two maps, map A, map B, and they use it to create two independent help systems for two different products. But they need to link from a product in Help System 1 to a topic in Help System 2. So until now, there's been no out-of-the-box way to set this up and make this happen. A lot of people have come up with their own in-house solutions and things like that. Well, now there is a mechanism for setting up the potential for cross-deliverable linking. And that is, here's an example. So you've got your widget DITA map, and by the way, no, that is not a Welsh term, that is creating a help system for the widget product. It includes a Get Started Widget DITA topic, and it includes a reference to a gadget DITA map. And the gadget DITA map, as you might guess, is the one used to create the help system for the gadget product. And it defines a key scope or a key space for itself named gadget. Now, the Get Started Widget topic has this paragraph in it, and it has a cross-reference to the gadget key space and a key named integ gadget inside of the gadget key space. So somewhere in the scope of this map here, I have to have defined a gadget key space and an integ gadget key. So remember that the gadget key space was defined on the gadget DITA map, so I can assume that the integ gadget key is going to be defined somewhere in the gadget DITA map, and that is in fact the case. So I've got this integ gadget key, which is defined as an integrating gadget.dita topic. So this topic here, which is inside of the widget map, has access to the integ gadget key by virtue of the fact that the gadget DITA map, which defines that key, is referenced inside of the same map that references the Get Started Widget topic. So a compliant processor can resolve that cross-reference as something like xref href equals some path integrating gadget.dita. And perhaps ultimately as an active hyperlink. And why do I say perhaps? Because, and this is very important to remember, the DITA 1.3 spec doesn't outline how a processor should generate these links. All that it does is it outlines a mechanism whereby you can set up the potential to have those links created. But then the implementation is left entirely up to the developers of the DITA Open Toolkit and other tools vendors. And so far, the DITA Open Toolkit does not include out-of-the-box processing for cross-deliverable links. And as far as I know, it doesn't have any plans to, because this implementation, every group, every customer, every company might potentially have their own way they want to do this. So there really is no one kind of processing that they could add to the toolkit that would work for everybody. It would be so generic that it would be almost meaningless. So that's still a roll your own, but at least there's a standard mechanism. And based on this standard mechanism, you can set up this potential, and then if you have in-house developers, or maybe you can contract it out to get someone to write the processing that will turn this cross-reference up here into an active hyperlink so that you could link from topic in help system A to topic in help system B. So this is the summary. I won't read through it because you can read it for yourselves. But these are the main points that I wanted to make in my presentation today, and I hope that I have. And I hope that I've left you more curious and more eager to try your own solutions than confused. It is a big thing to wrap your brain around, and it really is one of those tipping points, I like to say, where DITA authors, unless they're extremely technical authors, are not going to be able to really effectively manage scoped keys. You're really going to need someone with that 10,000-foot view who can see all of the content and understand how all of the content is shared and all of the content works together to be able to develop the framework for your keys how you're going to reuse them, how you're going to scope them, what kind of key spaces you need, where you need them, and so forth. Individual writers working on individual topics are not going to have a broad enough view, generally speaking, to be able to develop effective key reuse mechanisms. So unless you've got someone in your group who's really technical and really understands this and is able to get a much broader view of the content, you're going to be very challenged to use scoped keys. So that's the end of what I had to say. So if there are any other questions, I'll be glad to take them.
There is a couple of comments that I want to wrap up with, but there is one other question right now, and that is in DITA 1.2, the person, they have a key called dev.pkg or dev package or dev.package.count.
Okay.
The periods are part of the key name itself.
Right.
What would happen in DITA 1.3 if someone defined a key space called dev? How do I get around it? Do I need to go back and make changes in my 1.2 code?
You are going to need to change the name of that key so that it doesn't include periods, because if someone defined a key space, if you reference that key, if you're in a DITA 1.3 situation now, and you're processing your output with OpenToolkit 2.0 or later, it is going to consider that dot to be a delimiter of a key space name, and so it's going to be looking for a key space named dev. Then it's going to be looking for a key space named, what was it, PKG, and then it's going to be looking for your, and then it's going to consider that third part of your key, the one that comes after your last period, to be the actual key name. So it will not resolve your key.
Okay. Any thoughts on where you think keys and key scopes should go in DITA 2.0? That's a good wrap-up question.
It is a good wrap-up question, and honestly, I don't know. I think that the mechanism as is very powerful. I think probably in DITA 2.0, the mandate for backwards compatibility with earlier versions of DITA may go away, and so what I said earlier about nested key scopes and the parent definition always winning, that may cease to be true going forward. I don't know. That's just a guess off the top of my head. But I think that the biggest evolution we might see is in tools and how they make it even easier to manage these keys. But honestly, I haven't given it a tremendous amount of thought.
Okay. Okay. Well, if there are any other questions, go ahead and get them in now, because I'm going to do some of the wrap-up comments. We've got, excellent, nice introduction to the and a summary of keys. Very good presentation. Fantastic. We even got a "You rock, you're awesome," Leigh, and you got a marriage proposal. So I think this presentation was a hit.
The person that's proposing, are you independently wealthy?
They haven't responded yet. But, thank you so much, Leigh. This was very, very good. And the fact that there's so many of you that stayed on, I think this was a fantastic topic, and we appreciate it very, very much. Leigh, are you speaking at the CMS DITA North America?
Yes, I am. I'm not
Okay.
speaking on keys, however.
Oh, and what is your topic?
I'm going to be talking about workflows with simplified, lightweight DITA and
Okay.
Markdown.
Okay, so if you liked Leigh's talk today and her topic for CMS DITA North America interests you, I have to put a plug in. Go ahead and get registered. Get registered before Valentine's Day to get an extra discount for those early birds. So great. I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up. And again, Leigh, thank you very, very much. And for those still on the line, we will try to get this recording out to you in a couple of days to a week. And thank you very much for joining us.